From KUAZ Radio in Tucson, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up on today's show, Christopher Conover tells us about the issues that were the focus at the recent U.S.-Mexico Border Governors Conference. Robert Rappaport takes us inside the University of Arizona's Meat Science Laboratory to find out what students are doing to improve and promote locally produced meat. Luis Carrion will profile two important Cuban artists from two different generations, novelist Edmundo Desnoes and filmmaker Miguel Coyula, who are in Tucson for the cultural celebration called Cuba, the Island Without Borders. Experts say that over 7,000 languages are spoken on planet Earth, but that number is decreasing every year. Tony Paniagua looks at endangered languages and the work being done here at the U of A to preserve them. That's all coming up next on Arizona Spotlight. With our close proximity to Mexico, it's sometimes easy for us to overlook the fact that Hispanic and Latino culture is made up of many different traditions. Tucson itself has a thriving community of Cubans and Cuban Americans, and their art and lives are being celebrated in October with a series of events called Cuba, the Island Without Borders, the Cuban Cultural Journey. Edmundo Desnoes is one of the most renowned Cuban writers, and Miguel Coyula is a filmmaker who's adapting one of Desnoes' recent works as a film. They'll talk with Luis Carrion next on Arizona Spotlight.
Okay, granted, people aren't exactly lining up at the local Blockbuster to rent Cuban films, but this classic is really one worth watching. Based on the novel by celebrated Cuban author Edmundo Desnoes, the 1968 film Memories of Underdevelopment gives us a complicated perspective of post-revolutionary Cuba through the eyes of a middle-class intellectual.
Esta humanidad ha dicho basta y ha echado a andar, como mis padres, como Laura, y no se detendrá hasta llegar a Miami.
The film is one of those rare instances in which the on-screen version of the book does not disappoint.
Usually a writer rejects all the film version of the novel.
Desnoes, who began his literary career in the 1950s and now lives in New York, is in Tucson as part of the month-long Cuban Arts and Culture Festival sponsored by the University of Arizona.
Heming used to complain, everybody feels that the film destroys the novel or betrays it. I feel that the novel and the film are one and the same.
For him, the process of collaboration between filmmaker and author is one that goes beyond the simple adaptation of an existing literary work.
That's unusual. I would say one of the most unusual collaborations between a writer and a film director was with Titón, Tomás Gutiérrez Alea. And I think that is what managed at that moment in history when the revolution was a focus for a lot of people in the world, and through the film and through the character they enter into this film.
Sin embargo, todo parece hoy tan distinto. ¿He cambiado yo o ha cambiado la ciudad?
Tomás Gutiérrez Alea directed the film in Cuba and was denied an entry visa by the State Department to receive an award for artistic excellence from the National Society of Film Critics. He worked closely with Desnoes in creating this personal and unique vision of post-revolutionary Cuba.
Cuba libre e independiente.
Today, Desnoes is collaborating with a new generation of filmmakers.
I always identified a lot with the character of Sergio because he was a person that couldn't belong, in the case of Memories of Underdevelopment, to the Cuban society, to the changing revolution. But I think that more than that, he's a person that questions every society he's in, and he's bound to not belong in any society in the world.
Miguel Coyula, who was not even born when the original Memories of Underdevelopment was made, is a filmmaker that works with the latest tools of digital media.
Well, for my generation, I think digital technology has made it possible for us to work outside of the Cuban film industry. So it's the first time that has happened in Cuba because you couldn't produce a movie outside of that circuit.
He's also part of the Cuban diaspora, and now, in collaboration with Desnoes, is involved in bringing to the screen an update of the original classic called Memories of Development.
Look at that marble. It's full of lines, and it's beautiful.
Not the same as human flesh. It's marble. Marble doesn't feel anything.
The film tells the story of a stranger in a land struggling with old age, desires, and an inability to fit into the modern developed society.
I don't agree with that. Look, even that cloth over there, isn't it more beautiful now?
This film goes a long way in avoiding the common stereotypes of Cuban Americans.
Mira qué grande tienen los pies ya.
It was so hard for the Cuban film industry to generate, to produce films that it relied a lot on Spanish investors, French investors, and that's the image they want to see of Cuba: the dancing girls, the beach, and the rum, the tobacco.
That's one of the things that I think Miguel goes beyond. There's a cliche. There is always a magical realism in Latin America, and very little subjective understanding and analysis. While our project, both of Memories of Undevelopment and now Memories of Development, has a subjective point of view. It's no longer all the stereotypes of dancing and cigars and local color. Right. Even like the film with the first that opened the festival, the Andy Garcia. It's full of all the cliches of what a Latin is. And we found that was sort of a betrayal and a limitation.
So you don't dance, you don't smoke, you don't drink coffee. What kind of Cuban are you?
So there's a scene in Memories, which is something that happened to me. I was talking to a person, and she was telling me, so you don't dance, you don't smoke, you don't dance salsa, you don't smoke, you don't drink coffee. What kind of Cuban are you? Right. So it's that there is that fixated idea of what a Cuban should be.
There's no greatness in your failure.
Film Memories of Development is in many ways indicative of the complexities of Cuban culture in our modern time.
What I don't think a lot of Arizonans realize is we have a very vibrant community of Cubans and Cuban Americans right here in southern Arizona.
For Colin Deeds of the U of A Latin American Studies Department, the month-long festival at the U of A is intended to uncover the rich diversity that exists in the Cuban and Cuban American experience.
Here in the United States, we tend to focus on the political history between the U.S. and Cuba and the strained relations we've had over the years. And especially in light of the trade embargo that we have, it makes it difficult for Americans to access Cuban culture and art. So that's why we felt it was very important to bring these artists here to convey the popular culture of Cuba to Americans in a new medium.
I had an aunt once. My Aunt Julia.
As the Cuban diaspora reaches out from the island, it carries a culture that refuses to be pigeonholed.
It's a kind of a hybrid from many different cultures.
And for Miguel Coyula and Edmundo Desnoes, the process of filmmaking is one that has become more intimate and personal.
You have to be sincere with the film, and if you are sincere with the film will be sincere to 1, 2, or 3 people always.
I think we'll be in the same position. I think we are against the commercialization, the stereotyping of our existence. Mm-hmm. So I think we will be against the thing that now we become a market. Well, we should question that. One of the functions of art is to question, to show the ambiguity and the contradictions. So if they want to use you, stereotype you, now it is something that we should, as creators, we should challenge that.
It's art, isn't it? Besides, I need the money.
For Arizona Spotlight, I'm Luis Carrion.
October is Hispanic Heritage Month, and we've got links to more information about the Cuban events posted online at kuaz.org.